Hey guys, this is going to be another review of them. So this is episode 5 of the first season. It is called Covernant 1, or Covernant I guess it probably is. And man, this is a really harrowing episode, really disturbing. One scene in particular set in the past in Carolina. In fact, all of this episode is set in the past. It's quite a short episode, this one, but very effective, and one I'll never forget, that's for sure. So we actually start off with a flashback of Helen and her past, which gets more into the details of her whole strategy and the strategy of the real estate people, because we get this like flashy, old-fashioned advert for California and the area of Compton, and advertising like the values of it to African American people. And then we cut to like this board meeting which Helen is involved with, but notably it's her and a bunch of kind of crusty old men who white men who take up most of the board, and they talk about their strategy. And in this meeting it's revealed that the strategy has been to make like neighborhoods so unlivable for African American people that they're desperate to move to another neighborhood, and that they'll move to a neighborhood where obviously the real estate investors have property, and they'll be so desperate to make the move then they won't mind the rate. So the idea is that they hike up the rate to take advantage of the Negroes being so desperate for a move. And as a result, so it's like they're almost making conditions worse for Negroes to make money. And Helen is kind of being like sort of forced to go along with it and to actually continue this strategy. And there's a point in the meeting where she actually suggests, why don't we actually make rates competitive? Why don't we actually charge everyone the same rate? Because another thing is that the African American buyers are getting charged more than the white buyers, because of course they are. And Helen suggests, well, why don't we actually make things competitive and make it a bit fairer? And she basically gets laughed out of the room, and she gets sneered at, and she's just mocked by these awful like sexist pigs who you really feel for her in this scene, because they make like these really like demeaning sexist remarks, saying, or you can just go back to the kitchen. That's basically the tone of them, and kind of saying, yeah, you can either do it how we want, or we can get rid of you, basically. And it's a similar discrimination to the sort that Henry has suffered at work, where his boss plays on the fact that he's an African American and he's the only one to hold such a job in the company, so he should be grateful. And he sort of holds that over Henry's head, that he could sack him at any time. And it's a similar situation here, where they're really looking down on Helen and being patronising and demeaning. And it's like, hey, you're the only woman here, and if you don't do exactly what we say, how we want you to do it, then you're gone, basically. So abusing power as being sexist pigs, basically. So we actually then see Helen selling a property to the Johnsons, who we were introduced in the last episode. So we actually see them getting the big sale from Helen and the whole thing, which of course later happened to the Emerys. And that's kind of the whole setup and context. But the other big development with Helen is that we see her talking to a policeman in a diner later, and it's made clear that she's giving him bribes in order for him to keep control of the neighborhood when obviously these African American families move in and trouble starts off. So he's basically being paid off to like keep control, but also to turn a blind eye, I guess more importantly, not to say anything or not to do anything about the illegal practices of the firm, of the real estate firm. So there's kind of this tension between him and Helen in the scene where Helen is saying, he's like said, well, what you're doing is illegal, and she's like, well, yeah, but so is taking a bribe, basically. And there's just this threatening sort of tone, and because in a way, I think this guy is like a somewhat, decent enough cop, but he's kind of, I think he's just ticked off at having this burden placed on him. Is the sort of context, and later on, Helen is threatened. She's attacked from behind by a white guy who's basically just really mad that she's been selling properties to Negroes and moving them into the neighborhood, and she's just threatened and just says, yeah, just warned to basically stop it. So a bit of context there on the Helen side of the plot. But then we move to the really, really, well, harrowing is the best word. I mean, it's one of the most terrifying, truly scenes I've seen in a long time, and very hard to sit through. But we go back to the start of the show with the sort of creepy woman showing up at Lucky's house in Carolina in the past. So Henry's gone to work, and obviously the baby, the son is in the background. He's in the house. The dog comes running out, and the woman starts singing that song. And we carry on the scene from where we left off, basically, where she hears that there's a baby in the house and takes an interest. And Lucky obviously stands up to her, tells her to leave the property. But they sort of know that Henry has gone to work, and he's only gone to work an hour ago, so they know he's not going to be home anytime soon. But Lucky goes back inside, shuts the door, and the woman won't go away. She wants to get inside. She tries to get inside, and so what happens eventually is Lucky shuts the baby in like a closet sort of thing, hoping that he won't be found. And the woman comes inside eventually with a couple of guys, and they're obviously looking for the baby. And I think the build-up of this scene is just really stressful and unsettling, because you know something's bad is going to happen. We've already had information that something went down and that something happened to their baby, and it's just that dread, that sense of dread that builds throughout the scene, which I think makes it more uncomfortable, more hard to watch. It's almost like you're struggling to look at the screen. It's like you want to look away, and eventually they get to Lucky, and one of the guys rapes her basically, and it's just so horrible to watch, so stressful, because the psychology of the whole thing, the fact that she has to watch as she's being raped while the woman and the other guy looks for the baby. So she is helpless to stop them to get to her son, and she has to watch. And the way it's shot is that they cut between the two, keep jumping back and forth, really sort of fragmented, and her screams really sort of are heightened and blurred, and it's absolutely terrifying. At one point it cuts to like her eyeline as she experiences this whole thing. And yeah, she's being raped, But I mean, nothing could prepare you for what happens next, because when they finally get the baby, they put him in a bag and they just play with it. Really, they just mock Lucky, and sort of very sort of playful and mocking, but just so terrifying, because they're singing, or the old lady singing a song, cat in the bag, cat in the bag, and it's just very, it's not like they just do it and get it over with. It's like playing with it, like basically put the baby in the bag and start chucking it about, throwing it between them and swinging it around her head in the end. And you can obviously see where it's going. Eventually, when they leave, the baby is dead, and Lucky has to watch this whole thing. And this experience, what she went through, obviously makes it clear exactly why she's so traumatized, and what's happening in the present sort of makes sense. But we get the fallout at the funeral and at the wake, and Lucky is upset by a particularly like religious woman who claims that, hey, yeah, the the God has a plan, basically, and this was part of his plan. And it's something which always, I think, frustrates like anti-religious people when they can't really get their head around. But you can understand why Lucky was upset in this case, because it's just the wrong thing to say, and she slaps the woman. And they follow like the fallout of what happened, and just how, because obviously it's terrible for the whole family, but it's doubly traumatizing for Lucky, because she actually went through it. She was there, she was being raped, and had to watch on helplessly, as her baby was killed. And sort of in this callous sort of way, really, the way they were just playing with her, and she just goes into a trance and just isn't herself, very sort of in another world, really, and just doesn't deal with it. I mean, they bury the baby at one point, and we see her go to like down into like one of those cellars in the floor, and just, yeah, just isn't dealing with it. So it's left up to Henry to pick up the pieces, and try to encourage his family to like rally around the mother. But yeah, I think if there was any doubt, I think this episode really paints a picture of just why Lucky is in the sort of psychological state that she is. And part of it is just like background, showing why they left. But it was obviously important to show that, and Henry makes the decision to make the move. He rings up and arranges the whole thing, and is taking control. And I think we've seen since Lucky being very indifferent to the move. I mean, I think what this episode shows as well is the fact that, although what happened there was awful, and the whole thing is that maybe she feels like she's leaving her baby behind by actually moving to a different location. So I think that's another reason why she's been uneasy about the whole move and stuff, beyond the fact that they've just been treated so badly by the neighbours. But yeah, one of the most difficult episodes I've watched in a very long time of TV, but very effective. I'm sort of indifferent to actually seeing it, and I'm not sure I would watch it again, but it obviously did a very good job. The stuff at the beginning with Helen was also very interesting, and added further context to that side, and exactly what, the real estate strategy has been. So that's them for another episode 5. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back with more again soon. Goodbye.